What I'm about to tell you happened a while back when I was around 13 to 14 years old. I'm now 18. I had just made myself a Facebook account. I had a huge crush on this guy who used to be my neighbor and had just moved out of my street. I was super sad as I thought I wouldn't see him again until a beautiful surprise one night opening my Facebook account. I got a friend request from him. My heart was racing and I was ecstatic. We started talking a bit, but nothing really interesting or attention-seeking for me to develop on. But one night, we started our regular conversation as we would usually do, and then it got really scary. All of a sudden, he started claiming that he wasn't my crush, that he had actually hacked his account, and he knew a lot about me. He knew my entire name, which wasn't written on my Facebook profile. I had put a weird half-cut version of it, and it wasn't easy to guess the other half. I had spoken to my crush about how we used to be neighbors and how he moved out of my street. Now, this creeper began threatening me on how he would come get me at my house because I was young and beautiful and his wife was getting old and wasn't satisfying. As a 13 to 14-year-old, I was completely freaked out and shaking in my desk chair just staring at this conversation. At one point, I thought maybe my crush was just fucking around with me, as he did have this low-key weird personality. I asked him, and he sent me a picture of himself that was clearly taken within seconds, as it had a blurry, nasty quality to it. On the picture, it was an ugly, old, wrinkly, 40 to 50-year-old skinny man who looked like he had been taking crack. I was going out of my mind, panicking. My mother had warned me previously on how I shouldn't be making a social media account at this age, but stubborn me just didn't listen. Now, I was scared. I didn't want to tell my mom because I knew she'd be dead mad at me. And it was at around 1 a.m. at night, and I didn't know what to do. I just ended up blocking this guy and going to bed, trying to move on and telling myself that he was probably just trying to scare me. I was wrong. About an hour later, I received a call on my cell phone from an unknown number. I picked it up, and it was the man.
I told you I knew a lot about you, baby. Let's talk.
I hung up. At this point, I was just so done with it, full-on panic attack. I woke up my mother and told her everything. She asked me to print the conversations, and I did, and told me she'd take care of it when the morning comes. The next day, I went to school. My mom was working from home that day. When I came back that evening, my mother told me the creep rang on the doorbell around lunchtime and insistently continued to ring it. He then started knocking on the window. My mom called the police immediately. She took the plate number of his van as he left it turned on right in front of the house while he was trying so hard to get an answer from all the knocking and ringing. It ended up being a wanted sex offender that was charged with multiple infractions, including trying to creep on minors. To this day, I still don't have a Facebook and keep my other social media extremely low-key. You never know what creep can be on the other side of the screen. I was around 16 to 17 years old when this happened, and I'm 28 now. For some context, I was a poor high school student studying in a town located around 300 kilometers from my home. Back then, I lived in the rural Moldavian Republic and studied in Romania, where I had a scholarship to cover most of my expenses. Now back to the story. After winter vacation had ended, I was returning home by train. Now, the train station was a really desolate place. There weren't any apartment buildings for a 1-kilometer radius or so. The train arrived at 11 p.m. and the buses circulated until around 11 p.m. This was Romania, so there was no actual reliable schedule. I was alone and there was a significant walking distance from the train station to my high school campus/dorm. But taking a taxi was far too expensive for me back then, and I didn't want to bother any of my friends/colleagues. So the stupid teenager I was proceeds to think I can simply walk to the nearest bus station, and if I'm lucky I'll get a bus. If not, then I'll just walk to campus. It's around an hour walk. I get out of the train and it was a cold, dark night. The area around the train station was completely desolated except for a few Romani shacks. They're gypsies, if you're more familiar with that term, scattered around. I proceeded to start walking towards the campus. After a few minutes, I think I hear something behind me and I get a dreadful feeling. I ignore it and start walking faster. A few more seconds pass and I can hear someone calling to me in a raspy voice.
Hey, beauty. Why in such a hurry? Wait for me.
I am really creeped out, but I can't find the courage to look behind me, so I just start walking even faster. The guy behind me keeps up. I can now hear his footsteps. I get scared and proceed to walk the fastest I can without actually running. I hear him behind me.
That's not very nice. Where do you think you're going?
I turn my head and see a dirty, shaggy man around his 30s. At this point, I am really scared. I'm beyond trying to keep myself calm. The area around me is pitch black and silent. There are no houses, no people, and even no streets that have any traffic around. And I don't have a cell phone. This happened more than 10 years ago in Romania, and I was pretty poor. I proceeded to run. I ran as fast as I could towards the nearest populated/circulated street I could think of. I can hear him running behind me, not only keeping up, but catching up on me. I reach the nearest circulated street, and he is 2 steps behind me, yelling angrily,
Where do you think you're going?
2 seconds pass by, and I see a small bus passing by. I was nowhere near a bus station, but I started moving my hands and gesturing frantically, trying to get the bus driver to stop. Happily, he notices me, stops, and just as I close the door, still panicking, I see the guy grabbing at the door, trying to open it. Too late. The bus starts moving away. And I thanked the bus driver profusely. He said he noticed the guy was running behind me and that I was in a panic, and that's why he stopped. Now, I'm not a religious person, but damn if I feel like somebody was looking after me and sent that bus in the nick of time to save me. I've been working in the same home for the disabled now for the past 6 years. I started working here the week after I graduated college. I majored in social work, and I knew I wanted to work with the mentally handicapped. My identical twin brother, Garrett, has Down syndrome, and he's my best friend, and I knew I've always wanted to help folks like him. I won't reveal my exact location for safety and security reasons, but we live in the South. Anyway, on to Jeremy. When I started working here, I was warned by the guy who trained me, named Marquise, that Jeremy was trouble. He stated that Jeremy had tackled the previous social worker, a woman, and he had dry humped her while punching her in the face and spitting on her. She quit on the spot, and after that they decided they would only be hiring male social workers and employees to deal with male residents. How this home is split up is half of the dorms are males, half are females. All 13 residents, 8 females, 5 males, vary in their diagnoses. They all have varying degrees of mental retardation, and some of them have physical disabilities as well. Of my 5 guys, Jeremy and Adam were the only 2 physically combative residents. Adam is a low-functioning autistic, but most of his rage was directed towards himself. Jeremy was different. I honestly think he was smarter than most people gave him credit for. That being said, I was always on top of my game when dealing with him, or so I thought. The home is on the grounds of an old farm. There's animals that roam the grounds, some chickens, a few stray cats, and my groundskeeper has a dog. One day, the female's head social worker, whose name is Barbara, comes running into my office, her face pale, and tells me to come with her. One of the cats had kittens, and someone, meaning a resident, had strung every kitten there was, all 5 of them, by their necks on the clothing line. We knew it was Jeremy, as most of the residents were heartbroken. Even Adam was devastated, as he loves the cats. Jeremy, on the other hand, was sitting on the porch with a shit-eating smirk on his face. We tried to get our director to get Jeremy moved to another residential program, but he insisted we monitor our clients better and upped Jeremy's meds. The director is a psychiatrist. The meds seemed to be working. He pretty much just walked around in a haze, and we breathed a sigh of relief. Until one day when the nurse made the mistake of turning her back on Jeremy while she was doing an exam. He bit her shoulder so deep that she still has nerve damage to this day. The director decided after that incident, and the nurse threatening to sue, that Jeremy had to go. He was scheduled to be sent to an institution that can handle him better. All of us were relieved and counted down the days. The night before he was scheduled to leave, he went missing. I was paged an hour before lights out, in which we locked him in his room and was told that he was missing. So we gathered a group of employees and went looking for him. I decided to check out the library and stupidly went off on my own. I heard noises coming from inside the library, so I radioed the group. I was sure he was in here. They told me to wait and that they were on their way, but I decided, what's the worst that can happen? I'm 6'4", 254 pounds, so I think I can take him. I opened the door and catch Jeremy ripping a book apart, and he had already smashed in the computer and had a pile of books already torn up. He looks up and I know this is not gonna end well. 1 minute I'm standing there and the next I was slammed into the ground as Jeremy pile drives me. I'm trying to get the upper hand when he puts both hands around my neck and squeezes. It felt like an hour, but fortunately for me, my coworkers rushed into the library and pulled him off of me. Needless to say, he was given a sedative and locked in his room until the next morning when he was taken away. The last I heard, he attacked a nurse at the facility he's at now. So, Jeremy, let's never meet again. This is a story about a friend and a roommate I used to have who I blocked out of my life. I've known him for about 3 years. I have to start from the top to really explain what a sick and mentally ill man he is. I was a bit of a stoner a few years ago, and my girlfriend had recently broken up with me, and all I wanted to do was self-medicate to forget her. Me and my cousin were looking for some weed one night. That's how we met Joey. Joey is 4 years older than the both of us, and he dressed up like a typical kid who wanted to be ghetto or gangster looking. He stood at 6'5" and weighed 240 pounds. He was a massive hulk of a man. His personality at the time seemed to be like that of a big friendly dog that was a bit dumb but funny and kind nevertheless, so we both let it slide. He was a hardcore stoner and collected numerous exotic pets like snakes and such. Although something was off about the way he dressed, as he matched his do-rag to his sneakers and t-shirt and pants, which was all a bit funny. There's not many gangs in the area, but I would imagine in his all-red or all-yellow outfits with bandanas, he'd probably attract some unwanted attention elsewhere. If Joey was anything, he was a storyteller, and he had a story about just about everything. But usually it was a subtle or not-so-subtle brag story. He was definitely loud and a motor mouth, which I usually just ignored him when he annoyed me or just went home. My cousin had moved back home to work and I stayed behind. So me and Joey quickly became pretty good friends as I had no one else besides Joey and his roommates. Fast forward a few months and Joey appeared to be the ladies' man kind of guy. An influx of women always passed through. Oddly enough though, they were usually just single mothers or way older than him. I just left it be, but knowing in retrospect, I say it was part of his mental illness and how he portrays himself to desperate women. Joey moves away for a few months, but moves home. And he gets a new girlfriend, Tara, in the same week he moved back. Tara is a pretty normal college student and definitely not his usual overweight single mom type. One thing I learned was Joey portrayed himself as a sort of feminist and knight in shining armor to women, writing them poetry and all that stuff. What happened over the next 2 years revealed a dark side of Joey I never thought he had, and one I'm finally glad to be free of. It was absolutely terrifying, and while I chastise myself now for sticking around, I've had many abusive relationships as the victim, and I just grew so used to it, unfortunately. I do blame myself a lot for what transpired. Anyways, to continue with the story, I moved in with them and another couple. I felt like, why not move in with my best friend? He's a bit annoying sometimes, but everyone has their faults. I'm sure I'm annoying to other people at times too. As if someone flicked some switch on Joey, his very core began to become angry and explosive at the slightest thing going wrong, always threatening to violently attack other people and bad-mouthing me to his girlfriend and the other roommates. One night, I accidentally knocked his weed off of his dresser on the floor, and to my surprise, he slaps me for it. I'm shocked, and I move out a few weeks later. I decided I'm never going to live back with that guy again. I move out, and slowly Joey tries to get on my good side again, and keeps saying he was abused by his ex-girlfriend when he moved away. And that the other roommates stole from him, and that his girlfriend Tara, so he was just in a volatile mood after everything went wrong. Being a naive, forgiving type, I accepted his apology. And for the few months that we hang out, he's generally okay in small doses. However, after a few months later, I had to move out of my apartment and I was flat broke. So Joey offers again to give me a place to stay until I can get back on my feet. I accept, having nowhere else to go, and they move all my things for me. It's only a few weeks later, and Joey is worse than he has ever been. He beats his girlfriend's dog brutally. The police are called, but since the dog is the typical dumb, loving lug type, he just runs up to Joey all happy and playful, and the police don't believe it, so they leave. Joey begins to hoard cats, like he almost has a dozen cats. He used to hoard reptiles in the same way, but he neglects them and lets them die. And he's also fairly neglectful and abusive of his cats as well. He never gives them clean water, just leaves the toilet full up. And hardly ever changes their litter box. The smell becomes unbearable. Joey starts to break and throw things around the house. I usually lock myself in my room and let it unfold, scared to death with 911 dialed to my cell phone. One day, he pushes his girlfriend down on the floor. They make up, so I feel like if I call the police, they'll not believe me. He starts verbally abusing her about college, about sleeping with guys before they'd even met, and that one of them was a black guy. Joey becomes openly racist and calls black people he sees on the street monkeys and acts incredibly rude to them. I'm surprised he never got beat up for it. They break up a few weeks later, and I plan on getting the hell out of there as well, but secretly, as I don't want to deal with all this bullshit. He explodes one night, and I finally have the balls to say, if you lay one finger on me, I'm calling the police on you, so leave me the hell alone. He goes back to trying to be a sentimental romantic guy to win her back, but she doesn't want any of it. He eventually explodes and calls her a dirty whore. He dates a few different girls, but they find out he's just using them for money or marijuana. He puts out a lot of weird and desperate statuses on Facebook and starts writing his poems again. His poems are all pretty much goes like this: I loved you, then you left, and now I want to die. I find a new place, and in the weeks before I move, that's when I learned something more disturbing about Joey than him just being an abusive, annoying asshole. One night, Joey isn't anywhere to be found. Good, I think. I get a phone call a few days later at 6 in the morning. Apparently, Joey had exposed himself to a 15-year-old girl, even though he's near 30, and sent her pictures of his erect cock as well. Her parents had called the police on him. I pretended to care, then hung up and reported to the police as well. A day or so later, he comes back home and starts moving out. He tells me that this isn't the first time this had happened, and he liked to take out young girls to get ice cream and such. Sometimes he would point out little girls and say they were attractive, and I thought all this time it was just he had a sixth sense of humor or something. I blocked him on social media and his phone number and tell him I'm moving to a fake street address so he doesn't bother me. It's been a month or so and I haven't heard back from him. I'm hoping the police charge him with luring. So, ex-best friend, let's never meet again. As a woman, you are always told to be careful and watch out for creeps and weirdos. You can even point them out in a crowd. But no one ever tells you to look out for a wolf in sheep's clothing, as they are the most dangerous, and they can be anyone. I'm a 24-year-old female, and this happened to me about half a year ago when I was in Seoul, South Korea for my international internship. By that time, I had been to Seoul twice before, and I know the city and culture very well. I also speak Korean almost fluently, but because I'm European, I always stand out as a foreigner with my blonde hair and green eyes. At my internship, all my coworkers were much older than me, so I started to go out as much as I could, trying to meet more people my age. One of the people I met was this really handsome, tall Korean guy named David. David was a real gentleman and the son of one of the stakeholders at the company of my internship. Seeing how he seemed to be the ideal man of any Korean girl, I always wondered why he was still single when I met him. For those who don't know, South Korea has a really big dating culture. David's friends told me that he had one girlfriend before he met me, but he never mentioned her to me. Now, I'm quite a curious person, but whenever I asked about her, he always looked so sad. Like he was about to cry. so I would always change the subject quickly out of guilt. When we were dating for about 2 weeks, David's behavior started to change. Whenever we were in public, he would be really tense and held me extremely close as if he was hiding me. I asked him why he was doing that, and he said he had a feeling that we were being watched. I assured him that this was normal for me since people tend to stare at a foreigner, and he reluctantly agreed. And that's when things got creepy. At work, personal items would just go missing and my stuff would be misplaced at times, especially my makeup. It would just seem to disappear from my bag, and letters addressed to me would all be open when I had never opened them. Also, I could never shake the feeling of being watched. Even if I was all alone in my apartment or at my internship when everyone had left, I would always have this feeling that someone was watching me. One evening, I was alone in my apartment. Now, my apartment was a large complex in which existed out of 3 buildings with a little grass area in between and a large fence around it. If you wanted to enter the premises, you had to either have a key or ring someone's doorbell so they could let you in. It was around 11 p.m. when suddenly somebody rang my doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I walked to the intercom to see who was at the gate. On the intercom, I saw a young Korean girl, probably somewhere in her late teens, who screamed frantically into the microphone to let her in. She screamed that some guys were chasing her, and I opened the gates for her immediately. As I heard her open the gate, I walked to my window from which I could see the gate. I saw her run through it and stop to catch her breath. I kept staring at the gate, but I couldn't see any guys, or anyone for that matter. That's when I realized that the girl was gone as well. I couldn't see her anywhere on the grass area. I figured she must have walked inside one of the apartment buildings to hide, and that I was probably overthinking this. That's when I heard it. A knock on my front door. At first very quiet, and accompanied by the same voice that I had heard through the intercom. "Hello? Let me in. I want to thank you," she said in Korean. I made my way to the front door, as she knocked again, louder this time. "Yo, let me in," she urged. I had my hand on the doorknob when she knocked a 3rd time, banging loudly this time. "I know you're in there, foreigner. Let me in!" This made my blood run cold. How did she know that I was a foreigner? I had only spoken Korean to her over the intercom, and why was she so set on entering my apartment? The banging continued as I tried to figure out what the hell was going on. It was like she was trying to break the door down. Then I heard my next door neighbor come out and ask the girl if she could stop that banging. She yelled at him, telling him to mind his own business. Then I heard my neighbor scream. Scared, I ran out the door and saw that my elderly neighbor was lying on the floor and the girl standing above him with a large kitchen knife in her hand. She turned to me with an evil grin on her face. That look in her eyes still haunts me to this day. It was so full of anger and hatred, like she wanted to kill me with that look. Not just kill me, but torture me to death. She took that knife in both hands and held it above her head as she approached me, slowly, hissing through her teeth, with that evil grin still on her face, and her eyes locked upon me. I didn't back away though, even though she scared the hell out of me. She's just a small girl, you can take her, I thought to myself, as she was just a few feet away from me. As she launched the knife at me, I grabbed it by the hilt and struggled to get it out of her hands, not letting go of the knife and biting at me. She seemed more like a wild animal than anything at this point. The commotion had also woken up 2 of my neighbors, and a couple of men had come out to get the girl off of me. As she was held down on the ground by 2 men, she didn't look away from me, cursing at me in every language that she knew. She was taken away by the police, and me and a couple of neighbors had to go to the police station to take a statement. I called David to pick me up from the police station and explain to him what had happened. As he came to the police station, he asked one of the officers what the girl's name was. He became white as a sheet when the officer said her name. It turned out David and this girl had gone to the same high school, and she had stalked him ever since. She would follow him wherever he went, but as time went on, just watching wasn't enough for her. She wanted to be part of David's life, no matter what. David's first girlfriend was attacked at night one time by someone with a knife and severely injured on her hands and face. Although David was sure this was the doing of his stalker, he couldn't prove it. So he had moved to a different part of the city, changed his job, and left his girlfriend. The police took down David's statement and later came back to us confirming that this was true. The girl had been stalking us for weeks, following me everywhere I went. She even went as far as to steal my makeup or personal items and burn them. Not only that, in her apartment the police had found a diary in which she wrote down her fantasy life with David. She had also written about me and how I had bewitched David and taken him away from her. It went on to state that David would come back to her begging for her forgiveness once she was done with my face. She's now behind bars and has psychological help as well, but it scares me to think of what could have happened had I opened the door for her that night. And to the girl who was attacked and scarred by this psycho, if you're reading this, I hope you're doing okay, and I probably have the same nightmares as you do about those evil, bloodthirsty eyes.